Welcome to the Layman Seminary. What I'm going to be doing in this video is in about 3 hours, I'll be beginning my debate. And so at this point, I need to just time myself on what I have. And this debate is unique because it's essentially like I'm going to give my 10-minute explanation of the parable, then he is, and then we're going to discuss it, I think. And then we're going to do that for each one of the parables. And so I was really kind of stressed out, far as about the structure, how to do this and everything. But it's kind of interesting. I asked my wife to pray for me in in the midst of that frustration, even when I was a little frustrated with her. And I mean, as soon as we prayed, I opened up the text and it just everything became clear. And that doesn't mean I got everything right, but it means I got everything manageable for this debate. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run through this, not with a lot of passion, just to get an idea of my timing. Okay. And then I can make additional adjustments. And then after I do that, then I'll show you some of the stuff that I've done before so that you know that I haven't been waiting to the last minute, that I haven't just been doing the streams on the reading and evaluation and stuff. I've been doing additional work. Okay. So this is a two views debate, so non-dispensationalists and dispensationalists, right? And we're both free grace. I would say that he classifies as free grace. And so my approach when I come to a passage, especially a parables, I'm like, does this passage have to do with service, master servant relationship, or does it have to do with salvation? Okay. Also, as y'all know, I tend to emphasize experiential sanctification over positional truth. So my default is to expect to find that. And so that's another thing. Because I want to consider possibilities for that. In preparation for this debate, as y'all know from the previous videos, at least I think it's the first video or second video, I don't know, but one of the videos, we examined E. Dane Rogers' presentation at the International Society for Biblical Hermeneutics on the interpretations of parables, and specifically as it relates to Matthew 25. We also went through some things about Dillow, from Dillow's Final Destiny. And then y'all didn't see this, but I watched 3 of sermons by Pastor Mamerchi that are on Matthew 25 on each one of the parables. And so that helps me a whole lot because I have a good idea of where he's going with these. Now, of course, a pastor has to be selective in what he includes in a sermon, so he can include a whole lot more in a debate or discussion, but still, there's a lot here, even to try to deal with in a debate. So I was like, I'm just going to draw an observation sheet. Rather than making all these charts and everything, I'm just going to draw an observation sheet. And so we see in verse 1, Matthew 20, then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins. When I see the term kingdom of heaven, I believe this is referring to the Messianic millennial kingdom. This is not referring to salvation. This is referring to the Davidic kingdom that Christ offered to Israel and that they will receive at a certain point. And then we see be likened unto 10 virgins. Now, based on the context of the Olivet Discourse and also the time in which the bridegroom is away preparing a place, based on John 14, go away and prepare a place for you, that type of imagery like that, I would say the 10 virgins are tribulation saints. And more particular, I would say that they're Israel. Now, there may be Gentiles included in that, but I'm just seeing it's Israel for right now, which took their lamps and went forth to meet the bridegroom. And the bridegroom, of course, is Jesus. So then it says, and 5 of them were wise. And so I'm taking wise to mean prepared. And I think this is experiential. I don't think this is about salvation. And 5 were foolish. In other words, they were not prepared. They were foolish. So it's talking about that. The issue is they all had oil for their lamp, but the wise ones had extra oil because they had it in their vessels. Okay, their extra clip, if you want to think of it like that. Whereas the foolish ones didn't bring extra. Okay, so the bridegroom, they go forth to meet the bridegroom. I would say this is at the end of the 7-year tribulation or 7-year period. Some people don't like the word tribulation referred to the whole 7 years. But anyway, so what we see here, I'm not going to go into all the details of this, but all the virgins wanted to meet him. Okay. I think that's important. And the other ones are like, no, we're not going to give you any of our oil. You should have brought more. You should go out and buy some. So whenever they went out to buy them, whenever they came back, the door was shut. So the foolish virgins tried to buy the oil. They had a desire to buy the oil, right? To be prepared, but they should have prepared earlier. It's like you're getting ready for a trip. You can either prepare beforehand and not have the stress, or you can wait till the last minute and risk missing your flight. All right, so then we see in this part where they're asking the Lord to open up to them, and he says, I know you not. Now this phrase, I know you not, is similar to Matthew 7:23, but it uses a different word there. It uses gnosko, and where here it's being used oida. Okay, and I currently take Matthew 7:23 is not a reference to them not being saved, but rather to the sense of that he didn't approve of their ministry. And so he doesn't approve or honor their desire to be let in because he doesn't respect their lack of preparation or something. It's like, if you really wanted to be part of this marriage party, then why weren't you prepared? That type of thing. And then it says, watch therefore, for ye. So this is an application point, right? And so I would say that this is referred directly to the disciples who he's talking to, which represent Israel, and they also represent the future church, the founders of the future church, if you will. So it says, neither the day nor the hour when the Son of Man comes. Well, the virgins did not know when the groom comes back, but they need to be ready whenever that is. Okay. And so that's why I put like the virgins here. Sounds like a Madonna song there. So then we see in italics in the King James, and I tried using the King James because I think my opponent is King James only. It says, for the kingdom of heaven is, so it's in italics. So this is implied. And basically it's the idea that the man travels from a far country and entrusts his goods to his servants. And so this relates to stewardship responsibility. And I think it's explaining the call why the one should prepare. So in the previous parable, you have the 10 virgins that prepared. 5 prepared and the other didn't prepare. Okay. Or you could even say 5 prepared better, maybe, because there was some extent of preparation even involved in there. So we're talking about preparation to degree and not preparing at all, maybe. But here, so you think about that and you're like, okay, failure to prepare. Well, what's another term for that? It's poor stewardship. They had a responsibility to be prepared, whether they were professional virgins or, in other words, were they the ones that were kind of doing the entertainment and stuff? The flaming torches and the celebration stuff. I have to look it up and see exactly how they're described as doing that, but in the culture. But still, right here, you have this idea of he entrusting to them. And then it says he called his own servants, and idios is used here, so like idiosyncratic. And so there's this idea that it seems to be emphasizing his own servants, not just any servant, his own servants. Okay. And then we see here that he entrusts to these servants unequally. Okay. And it's based on their different abilities. And that this whole parable right here is basically about investing while he is away. And then we see that there's going to be a day of accountability whenever he comes back. Each one of these gives an account for, what they did with his investment and all of that. And so what you have in this parable is a recognition of the faithfulness of the servant. So you have this idea of being prepared. You have this idea of stewardship and faithfulness. So I think the whole Matthew 25 so far can be described as stewardship faithfulness, because the wise virgins were faithful in their responsibility to be prepared, and these people were faithful to invest. Now the one that didn't invest, he says he was afraid, and whether he was making excuses, I don't know. But the point is that he did not invest as a steward, and a steward is supposed to manage things. So, and then what we see here is that not preparing and not stewarding is laziness, because this servant is called wicked and slothful servant. And then what we see here is this idea that the talent that he didn't invest was taken to him and given to somebody else. So in other words, this parable doesn't end. In other words, if you are faithful in service, then there's going to be another time, and I'm just talking about how things are common to life, when the master is going to leave again. And therefore, the one that has been faithful during this previous time, he's going to be entrusted with more. And so you have this idea that the more faithful you are, the more that you're going to receive. And if you're faithless, that's going to be taken from you because you can't be trusted. And so I think what this is related to is losing opportunities to serve. An application, if one is not willing to serve Christ now, then they can miss out on future opportunity to serve Christ in the millennial kingdom. So then it makes a statement about cast the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. I think this could be the darkness outside idea, that you have the marriage banquet imagery, and being outside of that would be just be in the dark, because the brides couldn't, the virgins earlier couldn't get in. So it's similar language. They're both shut out. And then weeping and gnashing of teeth is a metaphor for deep regret. Now, sometimes that regret's in hell, sometimes it's in other places. So I don't think that is referring to hell here. And then so we see here, when the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the angels with him, he sit upon the throne and judging the angels. And so this is talking about the judgment of the sheep and the goats. So come in his glory. This is the second coming, and sitting up on his throne. I would say this is the Messianic millennial kingdom reign. Okay. And he's gathering the nations. This could be particular nations or individuals within the nations. I'm not sure exactly, because both things are happening. And I've always viewed Ezekiel 34 about the irresponsible shepherds, where it talks about distinctions in sheep and goats and all of that. And I'll include that in the slide at a point whenever I go through this. But remember, I'm leaning toward the idea that this is experiential. However, something happens. As I keep reading, I'm like, okay, we got this idea of inherit the kingdom prepared. Well, I believe that scripture teaches two types of inheritance. There's the positional inheritance that all believers receive, which is their relationship with God. And then there's experiential inheritance, which is your rewards, that idea there, or ultimate, depending how you want to look at it. So then we see the phrase. So basically what happens is he says, I was hungry and you gave me meat. I was thirsty. And so the righteous say, Lord, when did we see you in prison and all of this? And so when I saw the word righteous, I'm thinking, is this experiential? And in green, that's what I initially have. But then after I see some other things going on, I kind of wonder, okay, is righteous being used positionally here? And that's why it's in orange. So we keep letting it unfold. And we got the righteous mentioned again. He says, until I say to you, insomuch as ye, and I take this ye as Gentile believers, done it to the least of these, my brethren. I think this is Israelite believers during the tribulation, then you have done it to me. Okay. So during the time of anti-Semitism and all of this. And so because these are the Israelite believers, you could even say the wise versions in the previous parable, I think this is important to recognize who the judgment of the sheep and goats are. Sheep are believers. The brethren are Israel. So I would say the sheep are Gentiles. This is interesting because in Ezekiel, the sheep thing is used a little bit differently. So we keep going. And he said, if you didn't do these to the least of these, you didn't do it to me. Now, this least of these thing, I think it relates to the Sermon on the Mount. He said, if you teach anyone to do these things, you'll be least in the kingdom, or not to do these things, are great in the kingdom. But at this point, I'm out of time, and I don't really think that I could establish, and I don't even know if it's viable right now, and these things should go away to everlasting punishment. I'm gonna go and say that this is hell right here. Okay. But the righteous are to eternal life. Now, this could be positional and it could be experiential. So, in light of what I just said, I created this chart. So you got the elements along the side, the time. In my view, all of these parables happen in the tribulation. Now, the group, what group is involved? In the 10 versions, I would call them Israelite saints. In the talents, I would say it's tribulation saints, may include Israelites as well. And the goat and the sheep, I just have saints and ain'ts, but this may be Gentile saints. Now, when you talk about the question of preparation, well, them being prepared for his return relates to sanctification, okay, in my view. The parable of giving an account for the talents relates to sanctification. And the goat and the sheep primarily is related to identification of those that are saved. Because this is how you identify them, because if it wasn't for the passage mentioning everlasting punishment, I would say they're believers. But it kind of focus seems to be more positional here. So then you have the missed opportunity. Well, what they miss out on in the 10 versions is the Messianic banquet. I'm not distinguishing between a marriage banquet, 7 years, a Bema judgment, and then a banquet in the millennial kingdom. I don't think I can defend that right now. I don't have it internalized, and I'm actually even questioning its validity. The talents, I think it's a missed opportunity to receive future opportunity to serve God. And the goat and sheep, missed opportunity, at least for the Gentile believers, is to minister to Israelite believers. So the recognition idea, well, the 10 virgins were not let in, so their access denied. I don't think that's a reference to salvation, but they were denied. Then with the talents, what they're being recognized for was their faithfulness in stewardship. And then in the goat and the sheep, it focuses on saved status, but I should also include that he's talking about how they ministered to him in prison and do all those things. They showed to be obedient to the word. So the Olivet Discourse audience, as you see, are Jesus' disciples. The book audience, I take, is referring to the church. In other words, I believe that these are believers. And so the implications or applications is that from the 10 versions, the Christian who's not living during the tribulation still needs to be prepared to give an account of the judgment seat of Christ. The implications for the talents is that the believer needs to be faithful, because that's related to the account. And I think the implication for the goat and the sheep is to be thankful or grateful, because if a person is not grateful for what God's done for them, the chances of them extending grace to others is very minimal. And so if a person has anti-Semitic tendencies, like saying during the tribulation, then they're not understanding grace. That's not saying they're not saved, but I think the parable, because it mentions the everlasting punishment, is indicating that the goats are not saved. So, this was from some of the stuff I did on the prophecy evaluation stuff, going through E. Dane Rogers' presentation on that. His arguments, I'll go ahead and mention these here. The church will not be on earth after the pre-trib rapture. The church returns with Christ in Jude 14, 1 Thessalonians 4:17. He says the interpretation concerns preparing spiritually during the tribulation for the kingdom. And he says the wise concerning the wise and foolish versions, he took the view that Psalms 14 is arguing that the foolish are not saved. And he says Psalms 14 is concerning the last days and the regathering of Israel. I need to do more study on that. In Psalms 14:5, according to him, it describes when Israel is inflicted by their enemies as a righteous generation in communion with God. So Psalms 14:1, this is where it says the fool says the heart is no God, he would take that as an unbeliever. The wide, it's supposed to be the wise, is showing faith in God. And so he relates this to James 1, that if anyone doubts, let him, ask wisdom of God, that idea there. And so I don't even know if those are positional wisdom passages. He argues that it's like the olive tree that Jesus had mentioned earlier in 24. This is a very Jewish parable with the 10 virgins and things like this. So these concern the Jews. The parable before is a warning of consequences of rejecting the wedding invitation. This is the same prophetic wedding. The identity of the bride isn't mentioned. There's no church revealed. The oil could even refer to the two witnesses in Zechariah 4 rather than just the Holy Spirit. And in Revelations 11:4, the one that receives their message are prepared wise. The wedding feast occurs during the 75 days before Israel and the Gentiles are judged. That's whenever he says the wedding feast occurs. And that's interesting because that is similar to Dillo, but it's not the judgment seat of Christ. It's 75. So I'm not clear on that. All right. So he talks about how in the parable of the talents, Jesus often reused parables and put slight twists on them. That you have this idea of the postponement of the kingdom. You have the wicked and lazy servant that's mentioned. He says the outer darkness is for national Israel, that Israel was unfaithful with their talents, what God entrusted in them, which was the covenants and being a light to the Gentiles. The rebels that are judged in Matthew 23 that are mentioned seem to be in contrast to the believers. You have to look at that. Okay. Matthew 25:31 relates to the timing. So he's seeing the primary audience as the disciples. It relates to the transfiguration about the glory, which is a picture of the kingdom, all from the ethnos, the nation, but they're individuals. And he says this is an outward indicator of faith and love to Israel, because Gentiles will kill Jews, according to 24:9. And then he mentions some Revelation passages. I can't remember what they all are. It mentions the gospel of the kingdom here, which is when the kingdom is being offered. Mentions the lake of fire language. He gives passages for the sheep, and he believes that the sheep are Gentile sheep. And then this is where he goes into some of the summary things. This was an outline of some of his presentation. I took this and made this into a chart, so I won't go into detail about it. But what I did was I was studying the big picture of things. Dane did a presentation related to the life of Messiah. And so this is, going through the different gospels about this. So I got Matthew, Mark, Luke, Revelation, and other passages. And so then I tried to put it in the order of things and have that in that discussion. And the same thing here with these different issues that are brought up. And I don't think this is going to help me in the debate now, but it might help me in the future to keep things organized. At least how Dane sees it, and I could tweak it to see how I see it. Let's see, anything else? So these are my slides based on his presentation, summarizing it. Setting and stage of Israel. So this is going into more detail about Matthew 24. Matthew 24. Matthew 24. Still Matthew 24. Then we finally get to the 10 versions, which he relates to Revelations 11:4-5. These Psalms passages and the talents, and then Matthew 25 to that. And there's a little bit more on that. So here's some passages that were brought out concerning more detail about the discussion. This is kind of just related to the tribulation stuff, not directly related to our debate. And so here's his actual slides. Here's some of the passages that are being talked about. So yeah, I just made those slides to reflect these images here. It's kind of blurry. Hope I'm not hurting y'all's eyes. Here, I'm gonna close your eyes for a minute. And so here's the Dillo stuff. And then I went into the parable of the 10 virgins in more detail, but I went in all his resources that he depended on doing that. Now, this is not going to be my debate PowerPoint. I'm going to make another PowerPoint and include those initial slides and anything necessary. But before I go, I want to show you all Ezekiel 34. So in Ezekiel 34, you have fat sheep and lean sheep. So that's an indication that there's a distinction between them. And to judge between one sheep and another, right? So it's like, okay, but where's the goat? Well, right here it says between the rams and the male goats. So all right. So but remember, this is all by his flock. So from what you see, this sounds like it's only talking about Israel. But it's talking about Israel underneath the theocracy. And I guess because of that, you can allow for the Gentiles in that theocracy. So it could be talking about Gentile stuff as well. There's another phrase that's used, pass under. I have to find it. I will make you pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. I think the judgment of the sheep and goats, passing under the rod means that they're allowed to go into the millennial kingdom, which you could kind of describe as like a pastor, if you will. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I have some implications for John 10. I'm tired. It's hot. But yeah, so this is kind of like what I'm doing, and so I'll go back and I'll watch this video and I'll see how much time I gave to each thing, see what I need to cut, see what I need to modify. Like I said, I'll be doing things in 10-minute bursts, so that could affect my structure, and I'll move things around. But anyway, it helped me to talk about these things with y'all. If y'all been blessed by just, tips on preparation or you see how my study method helps or things like that, subscribe, share this with others, hit the bell to get notification, give us a thumbs up to help with the algorithm. If you feel, share this with others. And if you feel like God has blessed you through this ministry and you would like to donate, you have the PayPal link and other options like that. God bless.